Hello and welcome to the Green Profit Academy Pros podcast. This show digs into the challenges in growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit. I'm Christeen.
And I'm Steve Bousquet. We are the green industry experts in profit, growth, and leadership. Hello, Christeen. How are you doing today?
I am good. It is a Friday. It's the Friday before Turkey Week, so Thanksgiving holiday. So it's kind of nice to finally be here. I feel like since Tuesday, I thought it should be Friday. So I'm glad we have finally arrived.
Yeah, week before Thanksgiving. Still so much to do in the green industry, trying to finish up the season, get jobs done, get ready for the snow season. If you're in that part of the world, or if you're down south, you're probably just rocking and rolling, kind of slowing down a little bit, but things are still going for you guys. Today, we're going to be talking about stepping into the new year. 2024 is coming, whether we're ready for it or not. And we're going to be talking about what we need to do to get ready for 2024. And this should be an annual process because guess what? A new year comes every year. So we can systemize this. We can make sure that we put it in our planners and it's on our schedule. It's one of the most exciting things that I do in my business because it's where I get to dream and plan and everything is perfect and fine. And then we step into the reality year. But the better my plan, I find the better my success.
Yeah, and I think that's really important is knowing what we want from the new year, because I feel like there could be this point, and I've been there in your business where you're doing so much and you're so stuck in the weeds that you don't really take time to understand, like, well, what does my new year coming look like? Am I ready? Like, what do I want to change? What do I want to be better? What's possible? And there's a point in your entrepreneur journey that we all should get to where we slow down and we recognize, what do we want? Instead of just that, rocket kind of business management where we're playing whack-a-mole, we're going 100 miles an hour all the time. So yeah, I love these conversations where we start talking about like slowing down, strategic planning, like one of my favorite things. And, like you said, the year's coming, whether we like it or not. Like, what are we going to do about it?
And one of the things for this planning that is really crucial that I missed early on in my career or my entrepreneurial career was having personal plans. So not just revenue goals for the business, but also having a personal income goal for myself and my family. And that should be based off of my family's lifestyle congruency. In other words, what do we need to live the lifestyle that we want to live? So now, I'm very diligent about making sure that there's alignment with that. And also, I basically was just more revenue. That was the answer. But the reality was, when we're looking at the 5 functions of business, marketing, sales, deliverables, people, and finance, all of that needs to align to meet the goals. So there's a bigger responsibility when I'm saying, or someone is just saying more revenue. And so really taking time to address each one of these functions of business is crucially important.
Yeah. And it's also, kind of what you're saying is you realized it's not about this or that. There's certain things you realized, but I also know that you started making the space, for your year-end planning and being intentional and proactive. And I remember when I started doing that, because I, for many years, was against, like, I don't want to be a big company. I don't want to grow. I don't want to, get out there and do all this stuff. And so there was a point where it just started happening, whether I wanted it to or not. And I had to be intentional and plan with it. And so there was like, and, those who know, me, Steve, I have low adaptability, but strong, strategic. So like that strategic supports me when change is coming. And when we're trying to be proactive in business, it takes a lot of adapting because the entrepreneur is very good at creating, a habit, which is a habit of reaction, and sticking to it, so it's like we're always coming in hot. We always are juggling fire. There's a million things going on. And we typically don't have time to work on the business because we're so busy working in the business. And so there's that adapting to, changing our environment to recognizing the opportunities and slowing down and realizing like what can happen if we do.
And taking that time to slow down and really reflect upon it. And the questions, that I changed just from how do I grow my company and how do we get more revenue is, what next year, what do I want my company to become? What do I want my company to look like? What do I want to become? What do I need to become to get my company and myself to the next level? And so that means, I had to do some personal development. I had to focus in on what I needed to learn about business and in all those 5 functions, and also what I didn't need to learn in those 5 functions of business. And I needed to hire or I needed to find somebody to help me develop those because, I have limited skills. I have certain skills, but I don't have 100% of skills in all 5 functions. The real question, what do we need to become? So becoming more is that constant goal for many entrepreneurs. They always want to become more educated. They want to become more savvy. They want to become more knowledgeable about their trade and things that support their business.
Yeah, and some of the crucial things that small businesses need to do, and we work with them in our Business Accelerator Kickstarter workshop, which, man, it shines some clarity, on your focus on the business and gets you prepared, is they need to set new goals and objectives for the new year, right? And if this is something that you're new at, I would say start off small, right? Just like with Profit First, we say just 1%, right? Open up your profit account and put 1% in. So this might be where you're at as you're coming into the new year and you're saying, I have no space. Like there's no way this is going to happen. So even jotting down some new goals and objectives for the upcoming year on a piece of paper, starting there, you could get more in depth by doing, kind of like what we do in our Business Accelerator Kickstarter workshop is really going item by item and seeing like, okay, this is a new goal. We have 3 new goals this next year. This is how we're going to get them done. And then, creating the strategic plan is the end game and identifying some strategies that will help you overcome obstacles in growing your business, managing your business, or making that change. And it's little by little. It's not going to be this huge shift, overnight, but just starting to make these little changes and implementing some strategic planning and goal setting is, where businesses need to be at this point in time.
Yeah, and I think goal setting, such a broad term, right? So it's identifying where you are now, where you want to go. In our Business Accelerator workshop, we, do a 1 to 5 year. So it's because we can make a decision right now that's going to suit us right now, but it's not fulfilling the long term. So it's the greatest decision we can make apparently right now, but it's not going to feed a 5-year term. Like if we want to build crews, we need to start hiring people that can be foremen. So yes, we need to hire people because we need to get work done. But if we're never hiring somebody that can ever be a foreman, we're never going to grow. So yes, it fills that spot. Somebody's on a mower this week, but they're never going to run a mowing crew. So we have to look long term, depending on our 5-year goals.
Yeah. And the other thing I think that should be part of the journey and getting ready for the new year is, reviewing your financials, right? That's a huge thing, which is another reason why I absolutely love the Profit First system, because it's this kind of, once you get it set up, it's almost like a set it and forget it, right? So you can let it run itself when you need to. And then you can also step in and really utilize it for strategic planning and forecasting. With your cash management and growth to where you can go, oh, well, I really need to make $100,000 this year. That's what I need to take home. And then, so you could look at your Profit First system and your, your caps and your taps. So, what's your targeted allocation percentages? What's your current allocation percentages? And you can pop your income right in there and go, what do I have to make? What's the business have to make? And what are the costs going to be in order to support, what I need to bring home, right? So you're talking about that individual focus and planning of lifestyle congruency. And the Profit First system can not only help you understand what's possible in your business or where you need to be, but also, what needs to change or what does it look like for you to get to that $100,000 a year, $150,000 a year, that you're taking home to support your lifestyle. So really looking at your financials and being intentional about that instead of kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul to make it through month after month or year after year.
And examining your financials at the end of the year is good. We should be doing it monthly, and we should also be doing it quarterly. So what do we look at when we're looking at our numbers, right? They're just that bottom line, and then we have that net, and then we look at that net income, and we're like, it doesn't feel like I made that much. Where's the money? And I think that's one of the biggest questions that we run into when we start working with people. It says my net income is this much, but I don't have that much money. And then, we see that net income goes over to the balance sheet and it has a whole nother job, right? If you're an LLC, it pays the owner, it pays taxes, it pays for your equipment, it pays for capital gains, and it also is your retained earnings in your checking accounts. So that net income isn't net profit. And people say, it says Profit First, 10% profit. I make way more than 10%. They're referring to their net income, and they don't move it over. That's before they move it over to the balance sheet. So, what numbers do we look at? And in our workshop, we go over the numbers, what to look at. Gross profit margin by service or deliverable is probably the most crucial item to look at. And I hear it. I fell for it. I don't make money doing this. Well, but if I don't do it, I won't have my customers. So for some reason that made logical sense. But, we really learn in Profit First that we have to make money. All services have to pay for themselves and have a return on investment. All equipment has to have a return on investment. And all our employees have to have a certain return on investment. So that's just being honest with ourselves, but looking at not just that top line revenue and the net income. We have to look at, all the deliverables by gross profit margin percentages.
Yeah. And even marketing, that's another one that is I see a lot in small businesses where they're like, oh, well, I put this much in marketing. That's great. What's your return on investment? And I know, Steve, you and your team, after getting Profit First really dialed in and who your ideal customers are, as you kind of unpacked in the Pumpkin Plan, the movie, right? Which I love that story because it really dials it in, Pumpkin Plan and Profit First together, what it can do for a business. But you guys took that opportunity and raised your awareness around your marketing strategies and your ROI, and you discovered something really big with that.
Yeah. So once, we started with Profit First, then we did Pumpkin Plan, and finding out where our sweet spot customer was and realizing that our sweet spot customer really lives on cul-de-sacs. And so, we're traditionally spending between 5 to 6% of our annual revenue on marketing and advertising. And, now we're at 1.7%, and we're still, growing. It's because we're targeting where our clients live and reaching out to them in a more kind of strategic way. We did a lot of marketing that we believed that we weren't tracking as much. Now we track everything. And when salespeople come and visit us and try to sell us stuff, we pull out, the past 6 or 7 years worth of data. This is where the customers came from. This is how much they cost us by town, by source, purchasing, tracking that can be excessive. But, it showed us that one town, it's worth to pay twice as much to get a customer there because they spend like 2.3 times more than in another community just because of the size of the lawns. So, yes, it's worth to pay $400 for a client versus $200 because their program is going to be $2,000 a year and not $500 a year. So we've saved, estimating conservatively between $400,000 and $500,000 on marketing sales since 2018. The other thing with marketing, and we had Tony Ricketts on from Lawnline, and there's other good marketing companies, but he gives you honest data, and most of these other marketing companies just give excuses like you're not spending enough money, you're not doing it this, you're not doing it that, and the reality is, if you're going to work with a marketing company, you want to work with someone that can show you data and actual results, and not just spend more money. Because one thing I learned with marketing, I can guarantee you this: it's always expensive and it's always disappointing.
Yeah, and I've even heard marketing companies say, "Oh, it's really risky to tell them what their return on investment is," but it's like that's your job, like that's what you're hiring a marketing company for, someone who really understands how to market, how to target to, your market, right? And then be able to show you the numbers. So it's like the return of investment may not be good, but then it gives you the opportunity to make that change like you guys did. And here now you're saving 4 to 5% a year on your marketing dollars. And, it just creates a huge opportunity. So, really evaluating your marketing strategic plans and like what that looks like, and becoming more aware. So that's one reason right there. There's the proof of why you should look at this and make some space for it on, a regular basis for the year.
And deliverables too, and this is why I'm always talking about gross profit margin. We had services that we could never get the gross profit margin above 50%. So we either had to raise rates, which we did, or stop providing that service, which we did for other ones. Just because when you look at what that service needed for the equipment, it's a big investment, like let's say leaf cleanup, right? I mean, if you're going to spend $100,000 on leaf cleanup equipment, at a 10% net, you need to do $1 million in leaves to pay for that equipment. It's just one of those things, like you can only buy so much equipment, or you have to know how long that equipment's going to last. We have a truck loader that is over 23 years old. We paid $10,000 for it, and you put $800 to $1,000 a year in it. So now over 20 years, that's a $30,000 leaf loader. So how do you recover that cost in the 6 weeks that you're doing leaves? You really need to make sure that you're charging for that leaf loader if you're doing that, and that the equipment's paying for itself plus giving you a return. Because we wouldn't put money in an investment or bank and not expect some type of return, and our equipment is actually an investment.
Yeah, and this is, where it's another thing that you should do, right? When you're looking at your new year and getting ready for it, is reflecting on what worked and what didn't work. And that's a lot of what I'm hearing you say, Steve, is when you're looking at your services and you're looking at your profitability, so you're understanding in your business model and getting more in detail on, did the service that we offered, was it good for our company or not? What was the cost associated with it? Should we stop doing it? Can we utilize our man hours somewhere else in the company to produce a higher profit margin? What does that look like? So that's one of the things that, looking at what worked and what didn't work is the services that you provide, and what is that service costing you in your company? What's the equipment that supports that service costing you in your company?
And also clients. So one of the things, when we dig really deep into our clients' numbers, we'll identify there's probably a small segment of customers that it's just silly to keep. They're literally costing. Either they complain, they don't buy that much, or whatever they buy, we don't make any money on. It's just like identifying that. So, we were just working on our price increases for 2024, and we didn't just brush stroke and say it's going to be 5% or 8%. We really dove into, what type of program, what size lawn do we need to, and what's the distance away from the shop that we need to raise these prices. So when we were raising these prices, we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot. If we're already getting a 70% margin on that, we can charge for the increase in labor and increase in material. But other people, we had to raise between 5 to 7% just to get back to margin. And other people, we just had to raise the 2.5% to cover, the material and labor increases. So, that's the other thing I would really coach people around. Don't brush stroke. Look at some accounts, because you probably have some, we had some services that were not really contributing to the bottom line. We had customers that were not contributing to the bottom line. And it helped us to identify which customers those were and just stop we don't need that relationship.
Right. Yeah. And I think also too, looking at what you don't want to happen again in your business, right? Or is there an area that you're really struggling with, and I know a lot of the conversation has been around hiring, right? Just really finding good people to come work for the company. And so is it your hiring process that needs to be reviewed? Did you hire some people that it just didn't work out? You had a lot of turnover, so maybe paying attention to your hiring process and getting that dialed in, or something happened in your business to where you're like, we came into the season and we were just unprepared. This is the time that you slow down and you look at, well, okay, we were so unprepared. What do we need to change? What does success look like? How can we be better prepared? Was it, as you always say, is it, an event or a trend? Is it something that's happening year after year? Or is it, something that it just kind of threw us off our path and we had to find our way back? So making space to really review, not just with yourself, but even your team, what do we need to change? What do we want to be different? What worked, what didn't work in this last year?
And one of the things that we're collecting data on is during our one-on-ones, we're asking our team, what's your biggest challenge right now? So taking that, what's my biggest challenge? What's my team's biggest challenge in July? What's our team's biggest challenge in May? And then collecting some of that data and seeing, is this a trend? Is every May this the challenge? Is every July that the challenge? Is every October that the challenge? And it was interesting. We're doing some financial planning yesterday, and me and my office manager were going over our Profit First accounts, and it was interesting. She was like, we have never been this healthy ever in the history of the company where we have it dialed in this tightly. So, it took time though. And, I think as entrepreneurs and myself, I want things that have short runways, but to really lay out a full plan. And, we dialed it in and dialed it in and dialed it in. And now we've been doing it since 2018. It's spot on. And to the point of the percentages are within 1.5% of everything. So, it just showed us that you have to stick with the plan. Don't give up. It'll come to fruition. But what a control. I mean, that puts us in the top 3% of all small businesses to have that much financial awareness around their numbers. So it helps to be aware of that. Now, before Profit First, right about now, we were desperate for cash. We had burned through everything, and we would either take out lines of credit. I would loan money, back to the company. We had to tell vendors, delay our payments. So that was an issue every year, but we kind of repeated it because we didn't have a tool. We didn't know what to do, and that's why I'm such a big fan of Profit First. But if you have an issue that's the same issue every year, we know we have a big spend in the spring because we're getting ready for the season. So that's where that, down season account or start season account that we start in Profit First, making those is a big thing. We know that our team gets tired at the end of June. So, having that longer 4th of July weekend is something that we really look forward to and let everybody know. So identify what's the biggest challenge in every month and seeing if that's a trend or an event, and then making sure that you have a plan or strategy surrounding that.
Yeah. And depending on where your business is too, and Steve, you're talking about some very high level events and trends in your business, because it's been quite this journey to get there, and some of the businesses that are listening to this now, like they're in the trenches, right? Like trying to figure this stuff out. So some of the problems we might be talking about, they're problems that you're going to have down the road, right? Or challenges you're going to have down the road. And the earlier problems that you're really going to have is, one of them is and I call it getting in front of the profit first system, right? You're implementing it. It's going to tell you your business isn't healthy. It's going to tell you the financial cash management of your business isn't where it really needs to be, like where you guys are at now, Steve. And you discovered it, right? Like there's so many businesses that discover it and they go, well, I'm kind of short here. I'm kind of short there. When you're first starting out, you might be really short here, or you might be really short there. And we kind of talk about this in the book, to where it takes a long time to turn the ship around. It's a big ship. There's a lot going on, so implementing the profit first system, like you might just be identifying like, yeah, we're not putting enough money away, or we're always short in all these accounts. So we need to adjust our pricing. We need to become more aware of our pricing. Like, what does that look like? Our margin markups in place? Do we need to tighten up on our habits around how we spend cash in the business? What does that look like? So there's some bigger tweaks that might need to take place. And then eventually, you'll kind of get to some of those other things in the business, which I love where you guys have gotten, because it really shares like what's possible, right? And I remember there was a point where I was like, man, I wish that was my only problem, right? And I'm like, I have like 99 other problems and that ain't one of them yet. And so I love the opportunity of what's possible, but also being aware of like, where's your business and what should you focus on now? We have some clients who they're really struggling with hiring and retaining employees, and trying to figure out like, what does the business owner need to focus on and produce, versus others to where, they're higher up and they're like, well, we're really getting our leadership team dialed in, and they're now starting to do the strategic planning, for the year, and they're kind of bringing it to me and I'm reviewing it. And even some clients where it's like the whole team has basically put the guy in another building, in another office, and he's just kind of sitting over there, and they're informing him and letting him know when they want him to show up. So we have all these clients at different levels, and there are going to be challenges that come up that they're looking at, year after year, and what can I change? But really, what's possible and what can you get to if you start really focusing on the future and making time and space for this change to happen.
Yeah, it's 40 years in business. We still have struggles with a whole bunch of things. It's not perfect, but that's one of the things, again, that I love about Profit First, because I used to wake up at 2:00 in the morning wondering, man, if these checks don't come in, I'm not covering payroll. And then ask my wife, don't cash your check until these checks clear, But even with Profit First, it helps with the money side, and it enables me to then focus on, we still struggle with hiring. We're only hiring like 1 out of 20 applicants. We're still struggling with getting qualified applicants. So I can focus on that instead of focusing on, if I don't get these checks in, we're not making payroll. And that was some scary times, and if you read Profit First for Lawn Care and Landscape Businesses, my story's in there about how I was, came up with the great idea of running and hiding in Alaska because I was so far in debt. And, my wife not even knowing, and then it took us 7 years to work out of debt. So, I've lived through the money worries, and I know that is really not the best place to wake up every day. And things were heavy when something didn't go right. It really hurt. And I really felt, talk about victim mindset, why is this happening to me? And, I did not have that learner mindset. So it's heavy, absolutely. And if you're, we have clients we work with, they're in the first, second or third year of business. and they're feeling things. Things get tight. They feel it. And having that discipline and strategy of profit first is what gets them through it, because they know they're not just, off the cuff. They're not just winging it. And one of the things with profit first, like I look at the accounts and I'm like, if that was all in one account, I would be like, I'm going to buy this. We're going to get that. But I'm like, the system tells me, no, Steve, you don't need shiny. That money's already spoken for. So it stops me from my entrepreneurial spurs of excitement from buying equipment, because I'm like, ooh, how do I pay for that? How does it pay for itself? Instead of me just buying it. And I was at an event probably about 10 years ago, even before Profit First, and I asked the guy, hey, did you have a good season? How was your season? He goes, oh, we had the best season. I bought a hydro seeder, 2 zero turns, a truck loader. He was basing the success of his season on the equipment. And that's his report.
Wow. Core Growth Strategies provides business growth management solutions through cloud accounting, bookkeeping, and strategic business consulting programs. Our team works with small businesses in lawn care and landscape and trade industries throughout the U.S. We increase our clients' business acumen by creating business performance transparency through financials and strategic advisement based on industry best practices and benchmarks. Our experienced team provides support, guidance, and coaching, thereby allowing our clients to connect with viable data and discover their own solutions. Core Growth Strategies programs and services are designed to get your business from where it is now to where you have always dreamed it to be. Visit us today at coregrowthstrategies.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Don't miss our exclusive limited time podcast special. Just mention promo code GPA Pro to any member of our team during your complimentary consultation, or enter the promo code on our site when you sign up for one of our online programs. That's promo code GPA Pro. Yeah, and I think that's, you kind of know what group you are, who you're standing around based off the conversations. But it's very common that the equipment that gets bought, they're going, oh, we did really good because we bought all this equipment. But it's like, the numbers don't lie, right? And we had somebody asked me the other day that joined one of our coaching groups. They asked, what is it, that makes these other entrepreneurs that they are aware that we work with, what makes them so successful so fast? And I thought that was such a great question, right? Because they're really looking at like, how do I get where they're at? Tell me about their journey. And I'm happy to say it was very easy to share the insight because I'm very aware of all of them and their journey. And the one thing I would have to say is like, they were the best student, right? They implemented profit first. They did goal setting and planning and strategic planning at the end of the year. So everything that we instructed them to do, those are the ones that have had the most growth and the most success. So it was very easy to share with them, like, this is the ingredients of the success with the people that we work with. This is how they show up. If you're willing to do that, we will show up right there with you and support you, through this journey. So, with goal setting, it's important for so many different reasons. It really contributes to the big picture, right? Because it's like in working with these people, it's like it gave them the direction and focus they needed. It kept them in their lane, right? Which is really hard for entrepreneurs to do. It helped them develop their team. They had KPIs, key performance indicators that they tracked and things that they could measure and control. And we could adjust them along the way, which included the profit first system and implementing that. So there's so many reasons why goal setting is important and preparing for like what's coming so you can control it. So if you can measure it, you can manage it as you're setting up these goals and you're implementing these programs and you're leaning into your coaches. If you're working with one, you can get more traction as you implement these changes, you adjust, for things that came out of left field. You're being responsive versus reactive. You're having those conversations.
And setting goals for New Year it's important for several reasons. Like you said, it gives us a direction and a focus. Instead of just working hard. I grew up blue collar, and the whole thing was you just work hard. Just put your head down and you go to work. But really having direction and focus, goals provide that so we can do it quarterly by quarter, quarter by quarter, and also month by month and season by season. Having goals, we have goals by the round. We have goals by the time of year. Goals also provide motivation and inspiration. So when we have a tough day, keeping those goals up on the wall and looking at those every day, like, why am I getting up? That's why I'm getting up. So goals, that's why they just can't be a number for the business. They have to be something like that supports us personally, creates that sense of purpose, and gives people the motivation to get up and continue forward regardless of the challenges.
Yeah. And I think even, especially I've noticed this with my team too, because we're very transparent with our goals and our strategic planning for the year. It helps them understand, like, we're aware of the problems we're having, and we're not asking them to suffer through it forever, that we're addressing them and we're trying to support them in the problems and challenges that are happening in the business. They can see that because it's on our goal sheet, so just as much as it motivates us to where it's like, okay, this is going to be painful, but it's only going to be painful, through quarter one or quarter two, whatever, because we're going to solve the problem. It also shows them, like, hey, this too will end and there will be a new beginning of something better. So I think that really ties into the motivation and inspiration of the team, of letting them know, like, hey, we're on it and we're going to get through this together. Like, I'm there in the trenches with you.
Absolutely. And goal setting also gives us measurements to try to reach. It also gives us evaluation of where we are. So having those numbers, like if we want 100 new customers and our close ratio is 50%, that means we have to go on 200 appointments. And I know people are here listening to this, they'll go, oh, I closed 90% of my sales, so I would only need to go on 110 appointments. Well, if you're closing 90% of your sales, you're most likely too cheap, and your people are buying off of that low price. So be careful of having too high of a close ratio. But you just want something to track, right? You want to track how many sales, how many leads, what's our close ratio, and what are we? If you're closing at 90%, I would raise my prices and see if I can close at that rate. And I would keep raising my prices until my closing ratio got down to that 60% range. And sales are just one measurable, right? But we definitely want to have goals, and not only for the owner, but for our employees, so they have specific targets to work towards. And that inspires them to take action and achieve something meaningful.
Yeah. And it also keeps the accountability in place. And I know we've coached so many different business owners about, okay, they're like, oh, well, we have a bonus plan. Great. Tell me about that. Well, we just give them X amount every year. Well, what is that based on? And it's not based on anything, or we give everybody a raise. That's fantastic. Well, so what are the things they have to do to get that raise? Oh no, we just give it to them after X amount of time. So it really keeps, when you're tying it to goals and you're creating plans and implementing processes in a business, you're really tying the reward to the number, and if you're assigning these goals and you have certain key performance indicators, you're assigning your team, it ties back to that accountability. So it might be something they're already doing, but they're unaware that they're doing it. But if you're measuring it, then you're saying, hey, you're being accountable, you're meeting these goals or these key performance indicators, and then you can tie your reward, whether it's a raise or a bonus or whatever it is, to that award. And then the other side of it is, what if you have a team member that's not being accountable? What if you can't measure what they're doing? It's like, what do you do then? So it gives you that transparency when you're doing goal setting and you have key performance indicators in your company to really properly manage and lead your team. And you're able to reward the people that are productive and then also manage and properly deal with the people that are not.
Goals also help planning and strategy because they act as a framework for creating business plans for that and strategies for that small business and everyone who works there. So as a small business owner, sometimes the priorities can get thrown off a little bit because we want to deal with what's most important or what's in front of us right now. And we have to make sure that we are steering the ship in the right direction. That's why I like to call myself a directionalist. I won't hit every detail, but I keep going in the right direction. And this helps us to allocate our resources effectively. So we see a really cool machine or something that we want to buy, but in reality, that's less than 5% of our total revenue. We need to really be supporting our investments in activities that are way more than 5% of our total revenue. And it helps us, the planning and strategy helps us to make informed decisions about all the directions, the marketing, the sales, deliverables, people, and finance for the company.
Yeah. And I hear kind of what you're saying is as we plan, right, we have the strategic plan in place, we have these goals, it's all measurable, we're identifying what we're focusing on. So that really ties back to not only our time management and what we're prioritizing in the business, but it also helps the team understand, what do we need to focus on? Where do we need to spend our time? And I think this is something I know I struggle with, and we've shared this in groups before, Steve, and we all kind of chuckle to where the business owner walks in and they say, hey, I want to do this, this, and this. And then the team starts running off in all these other directions and they start doing this. And then a week later, you're going, well, wait, what are you doing? What are you focusing on? And they're like, well, a week ago, you walked in here and you said A, B, and C. I was like, no, that was an idea. I didn't want you to go do it yet. That's something maybe for next year, right? But it's if you have a high executing team, they'll go off and they'll do these things. And it kind of confuses the focus, right? So it's since we've implemented strategic planning in our business, if I say something, my team goes, where do you want to put that on our goals? Is this an action item? When do you expect this to happen? So they support me in my, kind of that visionary. And then they also know, don't just run off and go do it, right? So we're not wasting our time on things that is a future goal or a future activity or action item.
Yeah, and that's why goals are so helpful accounting, with accountability and transparency, because if everyone's aware of what the goals are for the company, they can provide feedback when we show up with these ideas and they can say, whoa, how is that supporting our goal just because you came back from a conference or the GIE or, Elevate with this, crazy cool mower that mows, it's a robot mower, well, we treat lawns, we don't even mow grass. How is that supporting our mission? So real life example there, by the way. We'll mow the solar farms. We'll get a robotic mower that mows solar farms when we don't even mow at all. But it was really cool. So
I remember that.
You remember that transparency is super important, and allowing that, and then also SMART goals that really help the business. Specific, measurable, obtainable, relevant, and time bound is and that's been around for 30, 40 years, that SMART goal. That's not from us. I think that's almost like a universal business concept. I'm not even sure who developed it, but it's been around for a long time. So that's specific. So you have to say exactly what the goal is. Measurable, right? How are we going to measure and count for it? What's the KPI? Obtainable, so it has to be realistic. Relevant, so it has to support the mission and our goals. And time bound, it has to have either dates. We're going to be here at this date, we're going to be here at this date, and this is when it's going to be done, or this is when it's going to start. So there has to be time-bound parameters involved.
Yeah, and I feel like that kind of creates the space too when you're setting SMART goals, right? It's like there's a place where you're working on your business. And this is something that, Steve, we've been learning in our Clockwork certification is, like time management, right? And there's this method called the 4Ds. And there's should be a percentage in these 4Ds. And I love this concept because when entrepreneurs are doing 100% of doing, there's a problem, right? And then if they're not doing 100% of doing, a few little small percentages are going towards, mostly I would say deciding, like, because your team is coming to you and they're saying, hey, tell me this, tell me that. What am I supposed to do here? So the owner of the company is usually doing and deciding. And the 4Ds is do, decide, delegate, and design. And I love this method that's shared in the Clockwork book by Mike Michalowicz because it tells you if you're doing and you're deciding and that's all that's happening, there's a problem in your business because you really need to start delegating and you need to be designing. And designing is going to allow you to delegate and it's going to allow you to work those percentages down on the doing. And it's also going to put, a different percentage with that deciding. So if you're effectively delegating, you're not deciding as much because your team is going to go off and they're going to be able to do things on their own and they're going to have their own percentages of these 4Ds. And you're going to have your own percentages of these 4Ds. So, really kind of looking at like, well, how can we prioritize, which keeps our prioritizing is focused on our year-end planning and getting ready for the year. And then how can we manage our time? So time blocking, scheduling things, having those conversations with your team members and identifying, well, what are my 4Ds? How much am I doing, deciding, delegating, and designing in my business? So that could be a really key point. If you're not able to, at this point, do strategic planning, then you need to take a time out and look at how much am I doing in my business? How much am I deciding? Am I delegating? And am I spending any time on designing? Because strategic planning really kind of goes to that designing part of the business.
And we know in the green industry, there's a lot of doing and taking that time out. We work with companies. Once we realize, and I fell into the trap too, just work harder, work longer, work more, get another crew. That's the answer. Get more customers. That's the answer. And, that just gets you on kind of this like hamster wheel that you never figure out how to get off. The executing is what most people are in any kind of trades. In even accounting, they're very executing. So taking the time to really, how much am I delegating, designing, doing, and it's just one of those things that you have to take a little bit of time out to do. So in 1981, Doran, Miller, and Cunningham introduced SMART goals. So it's quite a long time. I wanted to give them credit for that. Since they did take the time to develop it way back in 1981, probably before many of you listening to this show were born. But yeah, the 4Ds is really a big part of that and taking the time out to really realize that. So do, decide, delegate, and design. So what stops us, right? What stops us from doing that? What keeps us in the doing?
Yeah, I would say from my experience, not only personally, but working with other, business owners and entrepreneurs, there's so much weight, put into the do that we don't spend time on the design, the delegate, and the decide. We have to make this healthy choice. And like I was even in a coaching call today and working through some other Clockwork coaching methods and just really helping this person realize that, oh, this is this is doing, this is doing, this is doing. Like there was so much doing on this business owner's plate that they had very little room to design. And they just couldn't, see the forest beyond the trees. Right. It was like everything's like so right in their face, and they're so strapped with the time and all the tasks in the business that they were finally realizing, if I can make some time to focus on these higher end things, then eventually I'm going to get out of these lower end tasks that exhaust me and drive me crazy. So, and I was in the same boat. I remember there was a point where I was like, what do you mean someone else is going to manage my email? No way. Like, I am not. Do you know the things I'm going to miss and how important that is? Like, I need to stay connected to clients and blah, blah, blah. And it's like we have team members now that manage my email, and it's like, yes, I go in and I read certain things, but they put it in places so I can get through it quickly, So if I hadn't have even set that task down, I was so in the weeds over email, it stopped me from doing the higher end things in the business, like working on the business, or even providing higher end services or direction to the team.
Well, the doing is so comfortable because it's so physical. We do it, we get rewarded, we get paid, we get to build people. And the designing, you do it, and it's like, okay, it sits there. There's no action. So it's unfulfilling until it gets implemented. And then so we have to walk by faith with our designing. And then it's not going to be perfect the first time. And that's the other thing. If people have really high deliberative talent themes, they can design and design and design and design but they can't implement it. So that's really important to make sure we have somebody on our team that can implement it, because you'll never design the perfect, right?
Yeah.
But spending a little bit of time designing that gets us moving forward, our business moving forward. It doesn't have to be growth. I mean, you can have a very nice business with 4 to 5 employees, or 3 to 4 employees, or 6 to 8, or 8 to 10. It doesn't have to be a huge business to give you the lifestyle that you want. But imagine having a business that was intentionally designed, and not just, oh, this person called and wanted that, we'll do that. This person called and wanted to do that, we'll do that. This person, we'll do that. And it's in, Mike's book, where that Ernie, the landscaper, he's out there and they're like, hey, can you clean the gutter? Sure. Can you fix the chimney? Sure. There's a loose brick? Sure. Can you? And he's saying, yes, yes, yes. And next thing you know, he's got all these tools and all these specialty equipment, items purchased because he's going to fix it. But then he gets to the next house and they only just want their leaves cleaned up. So all the specialty, the ladder to clean the gutters and the wheelbarrow and the brick tools, they just sit there. So he didn't end up making any money. And then he's not known for anything. He's a do-everything guy, which lowers your value, because we all know we'll pay for specialty surgeons, doctors, tax strategists. But generalists get paid a little bit less, or quite a bit less.
Yeah. So before we tie it for today, I want to kind of talk a little bit about like developing an action plan, right? We're talking about preparing for the new year. We're talking about, why you should do goal setting, raising your awareness around things that you want to change. And, I am a very action person. Like someone says, I'm going to get 5 things done. And I'm like, I have 25 things I'm going to get done. Like, what are you talking about? Like, there's no time to waste. So I love looking at action plans. How can we execute things? How can we get things done? I wouldn't advise to approach it the way I do. I know people have told me, like, I run circles around so many people. So, take it slow at your own pace. We always say, like, have maybe 3 things a year, 3 to 5 things a year that you are changing or implementing in your business. And they shouldn't all be big, lofty things either. So, the things that you want to, to achieve need to be 3 to 5 things, and they need to be achievable goals. So like Steve, you were talking about SMART goals. And so, how do you create an action plan for setting goals? And so I just kind of want to take a minute to walk you all through, like, where do you start, right? So you're going to want to start with your annual goals. And this is what we do in our Business Accelerator program at much a more deeper and wider level than this, but start with annual goals, clearly define those goals. What do you want to achieve? And you want them to be 3 to 5 and make it measurable and time bound. That ties to the SMART goals, Steve, that you were talking about earlier. And then we're going to break those annual goals down into 90-day goals. So it's like, what can you achieve each quarter? So divide them into smaller, more manageable tasks or sub items. And, so that makes it digestible and you can execute it. You could have your team execute it, which is extremely important.
The 90 days is a quarter, right? So when I first heard 90 days, I wasn't always thinking in quarters because, that's like business talk. Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And I was thinking like, okay, 90 days. Okay, that's 3 months. But it's interesting how I think Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. It's just fancy talk, right, for 90 days. So setting these goals up and then breaking them down into even like what 1 month looks like and what the action steps are and the measurables around that, like starting profit first, right? You have to open up your 5 accounts. So let's open up 1 account. But if we are struggling with that, let's open up 1 profit account and put 1% in it just for this year to get comfortable and see that we can live and run our business on 99% of the revenue before we, jump in, and try to do all 5 accounts on day one. Maybe we open up a profit account in quarter 1, and then we open up the rest of the accounts during the year. So it's fully implemented by the end of the year. Slow progress continually is better than no progress. So we have goals, and then we want to stay motivated for the goals and, having achievable goals broken down into smaller goals. It's like the small plates in Profit First, developing routines, weekly, daily, monthly goals. Routines, delegate and outsource what we're not good at to get our support. So taking that, part of the 4Ds to delegate and delegate is part of the 4Ds, but outsource things like I was at a restaurant the other day and I was talking to the restaurant owner. She was doing her own payroll. And so I was talking to her a little bit more. Actually, I was interviewing her, and she has no experience in bookkeeping or payroll. And I just couldn't help but think, why are you doing payroll? If you're the business owner at a restaurant, why would you be doing payroll? I know people grab onto payroll, but it's one of those things that payroll people should do. In my mind, maybe, she had a restaurant full of customers and she's very good with people. She should have lifted her head out of the book, and I kind of forced her to by asking her questions. But we want to delegate and outsource things that are not supporting our goals. Celebrate small wins. That's really important. That's one of our struggles here. We're like, well, that's your job. You're supposed to do good at that. But celebrating, monthly, quarterly goals and celebrate those small wins. Just acknowledge people. Cards have been a really effective way in our company. I see what you did, cards. Thank you for showing up like that. I see that you achieved this. Really, really meaningful parts. Stay informed to continue to learn. Show up to the Green Profit Academy workshops. And go to other trade organizations and make sure that you are just staying up, not only on the trade side, but on the personal development side.
Yeah. And I would share too, Steve, that since you and I have invested in learning and, continuing to grow as entrepreneurs, as leaders, and even individuals, that was the biggest game changer in our businesses of, the amount of engagement we had, increased profitability, how we showed up as leaders. So just always, it's like we listen to podcasts, we go to workshops, we get certified in things. Like, we're like, well, what else, So it's just really investing, not just us, but our team in that learning and growing and staying informed is huge. Um, and another thing that has been really big for me, which was really, really hard, was to take breaks and recharge. So I'm one of those people who are, like going 100 miles an hour a minute. And it's, I don't take breaks. I didn't recharge, things like that. Even if I did take time off, I had, put plans and I was like, I'm going to work on my business and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And so what I realized was really giving myself that space to take breaks and recharge. And in a way that was smart, right? Like I wasn't sacrificing the profit of my business. I wasn't being extreme in like what I was doing on those breaks. It was realistic, but it gave me the space and the energy to show up differently, for my team. So I wasn't just ragged and, run down and short fused. So I could show up, I could be the leader that they needed me to be and not so edgy and irritable. I had more mental bandwidth to really support my clients and, bring better strategies to the table and better content even. So it was less stressful and I had more clarity taking breaks and recharging.
It's super important, taking breaks and recharging. I was at the dentist yesterday, and the surgeon, he only works 4 days a week, about 6 hours a day. I was like, man, that's a short day. But then I was like, well, I'm glad because he's not overworked. He's not irritated. I know, and I've been told when I get overworked, I get tired and I get salty and sassy, according to my wife, and salty from other people. And I don't want an oral surgeon who's salty or sassy. I want them rested and ready to go. And I was appreciative of that. And then I was thinking, well, I think my team, my customers probably deserve the same thing. So taking that time to recharge and not go all the time. Actually, I perform at a higher level, my team performs at a higher level, and everybody around me deserves a rested and recharged person.
Yeah.
And also take the time to reflect on why you're even in business. Why are you doing this? This is not easy. Like, this is hard. Like, in our landscaping and lawn care, it's a hard way to make a hard living, right? So you better have the right reasons to get up every day, the right motivation. Like, why are you doing this? Your why has to be big enough. So take some, time to appreciate the people in your life, the things you have. Don't focus on things we don't have. Most of the world, I think the average salary or income worldwide is $10 to $12 a day. Most of the world lives at a poverty level. Americans can be spoiled. I know I am. When I travel around the world and I see what real poverty looks like, it makes me come home way more appreciative. So take some time to reflect on what you have, who's important in your life. And, as my dad's 83 this year, my mom has already passed. I know my dad's not going to be around forever, right? They're just like, we can take people for granted. So take a little bit of time to reflect on that.
Yeah. And one of the things that I live by, and it was something that, I adopted years ago, probably about, 10 years ago, is, if I don't appreciate depreciates in value. So I look at the many things in my life and I spend time appreciating those things, and their value continues to grow with me, whether that's a relationship, a person, something I'm doing. And what really contributed to me being able to appreciate that was, the things I have in my life was I had to identify what I was going to say yes to and what I was going to say no to in order to make that space. Because if I said yes to everything, there are so many things that I was saying no to. And those are the things that I really needed to invest in and appreciate, which would then, grow in value with me. So those are some things like, what do you have to say no to in order to say yes to something else?
Yeah, I love that. What you don't appreciate depreciates. And that could be friendships. It could be your home. It could be anything in our lives. It could be your faith. Um, it could be ourselves.
Yeah.
So take some time to appreciate ourselves, because especially if you're listening to this, you were already in the top 10% of learners in the industry and in small business because you're taking the time. So appreciate your effort and appreciate everything that you did today and everything that you went to get you here.
All right.
Well, thank you for listening today and turning into this episode. We're going to have a special gift or something today.
Well, I will put the link in for our Business Accelerator Kickstarter workshop if you guys are interested in taking that. I think it really supports the topic from today. We are going to be starting that in February. So if you're launching your season, at the end of March or mid-March, you'll be able to get through it. It's a 6-week workshop. So I will share that link. And, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already done so.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Christine, and thank you for joining us, and we will be with you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast,
the show that digs into the challenges of growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit.